Tim Duncan. How he built hundreds of millions in wealth and chose a quiet San Antonio life. Tim Duncan moves through the world like a quiet force, deliberate, unflashy, and quietly insistent. Off the court, he has always preferred listening to speaking, favoring close family, steady routines, and a modest home life in a city he adopted as his own. Small pleasures, an earnest grilled cheese sandwich, or on celebratory nights, char-grilled oysters reveal a straightforward palate shaped by places that mattered to him, tastes that are personal rather than performative. Those comforts sit beside a life that, for nearly 2 decades, demanded the kind of focus and discipline elite performance requires, and they help explain why he guarded ordinary moments so fiercely. He married privately and kept his circle intentionally small, not because he wanted to withdraw from the world, but because he valued depth over breadth in his relationships. Friends and teammates describe him as patient and attentive, the sort of person who remembers small details about others and shows up when it matters. That consistency, showing rather than telling, made him a calming presence in locker rooms and a steady anchor in public life. In a culture that often rewards noise and spectacle, his choice to live deliberately and without fanfare reads like a quiet moral stance as much as a lifestyle preference. There is a domesticity to his private routines that contrasts with the high-octane drama of professional sports. Family meals, simple weekend rituals, time spent around projects that require concentration and care, these are the small structures that organized his off-court hours. Those routines are not glamorous, but they are stabilizing, and they created the margin he needed to operate at an elite level when the lights were bright. In short, his personal life is best understood as an ecosystem designed to sustain the demands of a rarefied public role. Living in San Antonio is not merely a chapter in Duncan's story. It became his home in the deepest sense. Drafted as a young player to a franchise searching for identity, he stayed, built, and invested himself in a place that matched his temperament: loyal, practical, and team-oriented. His real estate choices reflected privacy and function rather than flash. The places he chose to live were meant for rest, recovery, and real-life meals with family, afternoons tinkering on a project, late-night conversations more than for social display. That home-centered life shaped his public image as much as it protected his private one. In interviews, he often sounded like someone protecting family more than managing a personal brand. He deflected attention from himself and redirected it to teammates and community. San Antonio's slower rhythm and committed fan base suited him, and he reciprocated with quiet civic involvement, scholarships, educational programs, and support for local initiatives that spoke to long-term impact rather than headline-grabbing announcements. He attended community events without fanfare, supported local causes without press releases, and invested in institutions that would outlast his playing career. His imprint on the city is structural, felt in programs, relationships, and the steady presence he maintained for years. Car collection and auto business. There is an unexpectedly analog side to Duncan's life, a devotion to classic cars and the mechanical world. His car collection and the auto repair business he helped start reveal a man who appreciates craft, provenance, and the satisfaction of things that age well when tended carefully. These cars are not trophies to be photographed at shows. They are machines with histories restored, maintained, and driven objects that reward patience and technical care rather than instant display. Owning and operating an auto repair shop was never a press stunt. It was a genuine investment of time and interest. He learned tools, worked with mechanics, and surrounded himself with people who shared an affection for grease-stained projects and precise adjustments. These pursuits are revealing because they show how he sought places where skill and effort produce visible results. The work of rebuilding a carburetor or tuning an engine is, in some ways, a mirror of the discipline he demanded on the court: iterative, exacting, and quietly satisfying. There is also a social texture to this hobby. In a garage, status is measured by competence and patience rather than by social currency. Time spent under a hood or at a workbench creates bonds grounded in mutual respect for craft. For someone who spent a career in a stadium's glare, the garage offered anonymity and the simple pleasure of craftsmanship two things he cherished: NBA career and earnings. On the hardwood, Duncan's career is a study in controlled excellence. He arrived as a player with an enormous promise and matured into a cornerstone whose presence reshaped team construction and opponent game plans. His play was rooted in fundamentals: footwork, timing, positioning, and defensive anticipation skills that rarely produce flamboyant highlights but that win games and seasons when applied consistently. Over the span of his career, those quiet, repeatable actions translated into honors, championships, and the kind of trust coaches and teammates can only grant to those who reliably deliver. He spent 19 seasons with the same franchise, a length of tenure that allowed him to influence organizational identity as much as roster construction. During that time, he helped lead teams to multiple championships, earning individual accolades along the way but never using those as an excuse to prioritize self over system. Contracts and endorsements accumulated as his status rose, but the posture he took toward income mirrored his on-court sensibility: pragmatic, measured, and focused on the long term. Rather than conspicuous consumption, his financial choices favored durability and sensible stewardship investments in steady businesses, community projects, and ventures aligned with personal interests. This conservative approach to wealth echoes the larger pattern of his life: prefers substance over spectacle, and builds systems that endure. Wealth and investments. Duncan's approach to wealth is better described as stewardship than accumulation for its own sake. Salary and sponsorships provided resources. How he allocated them revealed a temperament shaped by patience, principle, and practicality. Investments were often aligned with interests and values rather than with the chase for the next flashy payout. Durable holdings, community-based ventures, and businesses that could be managed in ways that reflected his temperament. He did not seek headline-making deals or risky financial gambits for the sake of publicity. Instead, he favored diversified portfolios and projects that increased his capacity to do quiet, sustained good funding for education, small businesses that provided local jobs, and enterprises that could grow incrementally. The effect was not instant glamour, but a durable foundation that allowed for continued influence and security beyond playing years. That slow, methodical approach to money is itself a kind of philosophy. Delay gratification, preserve capital, and use wealth to enable impact. Philanthropy and community involvement. A through line in Duncan's life is his steady commitment to community work. Philanthropy for him was not a public relations exercise. It was an ethical response to privilege and a desire to remove barriers for others. Much of his giving targeted education, youth programs, and healthcare areas where consistent investment produces compounding outcomes over time. He preferred targeted, practical initiatives, scholarships that opened doors, after-school programs that offered structure, and health projects that addressed tangible needs. Rather than seeking public recognition for these actions, he often let results do the speaking. He funded programs that helped children stay in school, supported clinics that treated underserved families, and invested in local nonprofits that delivered measurable outcomes. That approach reinforced an image of someone who judged impact by the lives it changed rather than by the press it generated. In an environment where philanthropic gestures can be performative, his were persistently utilitarian and thoughtfully executed. Basketball style and on-court presence. Watching Duncan play was like watching a master craftsman. He would not rely solely on raw athleticism. Instead, he refined movement into efficiency. Post moves that taught a generation of players, defensive reads that altered opponents' breaking points, and a passing sense that turned structured possessions into scoring opportunities combined into a game that prized team accomplishment over personal highlight reels. His style was quietly theatrical in the sense that it had a choreography all its own, precise, repeatable, and devastatingly effective. His greatest contributions were frequently subtle and cumulative. A well-timed step could cut off a driving lane. A soft pass could alter a defense's balance. A rebound could give a team an extra possession at a critical moment. Leadership was an extension of this approach. He modeled intensity in practice, dove for loose balls without fanfare, and made unselfish choices in crunch moments. Over time, those small acts aggregated into a career defined as much by influence as by individual statistics. Championship moments and legacy. Championships are the visible currency in basketball, and Duncan's ledger contains multiple titles that speak to sustained excellence rather than a single dominant era. Those championships were not the product of one player's ego, but of systems that magnified strengths and smoothed weaknesses. Duncan repeatedly served as the axis around which teams rotated. Coaches trusted his instincts, teammates deferred to his judgment, and opponents schemed to contain him. In the rarefied environment of playoff basketball, that stability proved invaluable. Legacy, however, is subtler than trophies. It lives in the players who studied his footwork, the coaches who built teams around the principles he embodied, and the standard of professionalism he set. Young centers and forwards who grew up watching him found in his game a template for combining discipline with dominance, and that template has been copied, adapted, and taught as a fundamental of modern big man play. His influence extends into coaching philosophies, scouting priorities, and even the kinds of drills used in development programs. Training ethos and work habits. Duncan's preparation resembled a craftsman's apprenticeship more than an athlete's hustle. He devoted time to fundamentals, treated the off-season as a space for refinement, and maintained routines that evolved with the needs of his body and the demands of the league. He did not chase every trend. Instead, he chose practices that delivered incremental improvement and sustained availability. That long-horizon view training as a career, not a season, allowed him to perform at a high level for an extended period. Stories about early mornings, repetition drills, and patient corrections from coaches only hint at the larger training ethic. He built a process that accounted for wear and tear, adjusted as needed, and emphasized recovery and longevity. Consistency, not episodic intensity, became the organizing principle. That approach is one reason his effectiveness did not collapse as the league grew faster and younger. He simply adapted with measured changes rather than wholesale reinvention. Relationships with teammates and coaches. Within the team, Duncan's defining quality was reliability. He was the teammate who arrived prepared, who prioritized the collective mission, and who behaved in ways that made the coach's job easier. That kind of trust cannot be manufactured quickly. It is the product of repeatable behavior over a long period. Coaches found both a tactical ally and a cultural stabilizer in him. Younger players discovered a model for how to navigate pressure without drama. He never sought authority through volume. Instead, he earned it with competence and steady example. He mentored quietly, staying after practice to help a rookie with footwork, offering a drill at the right moment, or making a call to a struggling teammate. The cumulative effect was a culture in which accountability was shared and expectations were high, and that culture is one reason why his teams remained competitive year after year. Public image and media relations. Compared to many elite athletes, Duncan's rapport with the media was minimal and purposeful. He rarely used interviews to build a persona. Instead, he treated them like transactions, brief, respectful, and team-focused. That posture preserved private life energy for family and craft, and it gave him control over when and how he entered public conversation. The result was a public image that appeared enigmatic to some, but intentional to those who looked closely. Silence can be interpreted in many ways, as reticence, as mystery, or as strategy. For Duncan, it seemed to be the latter, an allocation of attention to what he valued most. In an era when athletes often monetize personality, he modeled another approach. Let performance do the talking, and let public presence be functional rather than performative. That choice had costs in terms of celebrity currency, but benefits in stability and trust. Moments of vulnerability and growth. Even the most composed figures show cracks of vulnerability, and those moments made Duncan more relatable. There were games and seasons when fatigue, injury, or the emotional toll of competition revealed an inner strain. Those instances did not diminish his stature, they humanized him. Fans seeing a stoic figure pause or show emotion were reminded that greatness does not erase the human experience of doubt, pain, and adaptation. Growth over his career often manifested not in spectacular reinventions, but in subtle softening, learning to delegate, accepting support in new ways, and transitioning from primary performer to mentor and advisor. That evolution was as significant as any tactical change because it enabled him to remain relevant after his peak playing years. The ability to translate competitive intelligence into mentorship and organizational contribution is one of the quieter signs of maturity. Business decisions and post-career moves. Post-career choices reflected the same pragmatic sensibility that shaped his on-court life. Investments were selected with care. Businesses were often local or connected to authentic interests. He avoided quick monetization of his name in favor of projects that could be stewarded responsibly over time. That conservatism preserved credibility and created sustainable avenues for influence beyond the scoreboard. The advantage of such a restrained approach is twofold. It maintains moral capital, and it builds institutions rather than fleeting ventures. He prioritized partnerships that aligned with his values and projects that could be measured by impact rather than by short-lived publicity. This continuity between sporting values and business decisions reinforced a coherent public narrative, quiet influence, and mentorship. Perhaps the most enduring impact of his public life is mentorship. He rarely sought headlines for guidance, but he invested time in players, coaches, and community members in ways that created long-term value. Mentorship for him was practical and immediate, a demonstration on footwork, a corrective drill, a reputational nudge for a promising coach. These acts multiplied over time as those he helped passed lessons forward. The ripple effects are visible in development programs and coaching practices that emphasize fundamentals and temperament. The people he influenced often became teachers themselves, propagating a style of seriousness and modesty that changes institutional habits slowly but persistently. The imprint of mentorship can be diffuse but deep, and in Duncan's case, it shows up in the habits and priorities of the people who followed him. Contrast with celebrity culture. Duncan's life offers an instructive contrast to modern celebrity. While many athletes treat fame as a currency to be spent openly, he treated it as a responsibility to be managed. That meant fewer self-promotional moves, less tabloid presence, and a greater emphasis on stability and substance. The trade-off was lower visibility but higher continuity, privacy, relational stability, and a reputation less susceptible to the vicissitudes of trending attention. In a culture that prizes immediate visibility, his approach felt countercultural but also durable. It demonstrated that excellence can be pursued without spectacle, and that humility can function as a sustained strategy rather than as a personal limitation. That model has appeal beyond sport, in business, civic life, and education. The same orientation toward long-term results often produces more durable outcomes than short bursts of attention. The anatomy of a quiet leader. What made him a quiet leader was not a single trait, but a constellation: dependability, technical craft, restraint, and the preference for team outcomes over individual accolades. Leadership, in his case, was embodied rather than declared. It was visible in daily acts more than in speeches. That mode of leading made it contagious. Teammates who observed the pattern often adopted similar behaviors, and over time those behaviors coalesced into a culture that produced consistent results. This model translates beyond the hardwood. In organizations, schools, and civic groups, leadership that privileges action over rhetoric and consistency over charisma tends to build institutions that persist. His example is a clear demonstration of how repeated small choices accumulate into cultural norms that sustain performance over time. Anecdotes that reveal character. Scattered anecdotes across his career illustrate the pattern rather than the exception. A visit to a youth program where he quietly fixed a broken hoop, a teammate's memory of him staying after practice to help a rookie with footwork, a neighbor recalling him mowing a lawn without fanfare. These moments matter because they confirm a consistent orientation toward practical service. They are small scenes that, when assembled, sketch a character who chose to do unglamorous work for the sake of others. There are quieter backstage details too. The way he prepared game snacks for younger players while traveling, the moments he spent teaching fundamentals in clinics, the small gestures that signaled priority and care. These are not headline-making acts, but they are the connective tissue of influence, slow, low-key, and ultimately pervasive. Tim Duncan's story is not a spectacle of transformation but a study in refinement. He started with natural gifts and polished them into craft through consistent discipline and care. He built a life that prioritized family, community, and workmanship, and he used success as a platform for steady stewardship rather than for fast returns or fleeting attention. That arc, talent refined into craft, acclaim converted into service, is both practical and enduring. If Tim Duncan's story of quiet discipline, steady choices, and lasting impact resonated with you, consider leaving a like and sharing this video with someone who values substance over spectacle. Your support helps us tell more stories about figures who built legacies the slow, deliberate way. And if you want more content like this, subscribe so you never miss a story worth watching.